Today, we begin our roundtable, our program, I should say, with the German roundtable, and we feature three speakers: Michael Ahrens, who is the Consul General of Germany in Chicago; Simon Morris Langer of the Allianz Foundation in Berlin; and then we hear from Imad Al-Suleiman, a Berlin-based human rights activist. And the German roundtable will be followed with a keynote by a senior representative of the US State Department, Marta Costanza Youth. And Ms. Youth is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration in the State Department. So our conference will conclude early this afternoon with a Mexico roundtable that David Wellman will be moderating, and that will feature Reina Torres Mendeville, who is the Consul General of Mexico and the Dean of the Chicago Consular Corps. So we're delighted to have her be present at our conference. Then we will also hear from Antonio Alejo from the University of Granada in Spain, and Jose Pablo Martinez, a Los Angeles-based migrant activist. Now, to our online audience, you are encouraged to submit your questions during the presentations. So you submit your questions to the speakers or speaker, in the case of the keynote, in writing through the Q&A portal that you will find at the bottom of your screen. The questions will be read by the moderator, that is to say myself or David, and addressed to the panelists at the conclusion of their presentation. So allow me to start just a little earlier than we had scheduled the first panel by introducing our first speaker. And our first speaker, as I mentioned, is Michael Ahrens. Michael is the German Consul General in Chicago, and he took up that position in August of 2023. Before arriving in Chicago, Michael served as Minister Counselor for Security and Defense Policy at the German Embassy in Washington, D.C. And prior to that, he was the Deputy Head of Division for Humanitarian Assistance at the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Berlin. That is from 2015 to 2019. So Michael's previous postings are fascinating. They include a posting as Counselor for Cultural and Legal Affairs at the German Embassy in Seoul, South Korea. He has been Consul at the German Consulates General in Los Angeles and San Francisco, completing a really extraordinary set of postings to the United States. And he has also served as the German Consul General in Shanghai. Michael has also worked from 2006 to 2009 at the Federal Office on Humanitarian Assistance in Asia. Michael joined the German diplomatic service in quite a momentous year, 1989. Great timing, Michael. And may I extend a very, very hearty welcome to you, and we look forward to hearing your remarks. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey, and welcome to everybody in the audience. As Consul General in Chicago, of course, I'm not an expert on the topic that's at hand today, but at least I've worked on it in the past, as you've heard, at least on the humanitarian assistance side. And then my colleagues in Berlin were nice enough to provide me some more background for today. And I believe this is like really a timely discussion, and as it happened, actually, Germany just released its new humanitarian assistance strategy last week. So it's a new one, not yet apparently only in German at the moment. So I guess they're still on in the translation, but this is something also for those who are then interested later also to learn more a little bit about how we see the humanitarian system and how we work. That would be probably a great resource. I'm frozen on my own screen. I hope you can all hear me properly. Then I would like to start. So I will speak a little bit about three different topics, a little bit different from the order than the questions. One about the important organizations, and then how do we, Germany, as humanitarian donor work on forced migration issues, both conflict-reduced and disaster-reduced migration, and then also a little bit on the impact of forced migration on Germany. I'm sure my co-panelists from Germany will talk about that also, and probably more detail than I can. But Germany has been for a long time and still is the only country that is both one of the 10 largest donors to the UNHCR, namely the second largest bilateral donor and one of the 10 largest refugee hosting countries in the world, at number 3 at the moment. So this was always special because there's different fora at UNHCR, one where refugee hosting countries come together, one where donors come together, and it was always great for us to have the perspective from both sides. With that, I already named one of the most important institutions, of course, UNHCR, but then also within the humanitarian system has become more important IOM, International Organization for Migration. For both institutions, Germany is the second largest bilateral donor and working closely also on content and policy development, having led the steering committees quite recently for both organizations. But then Germany has like a huge variety of NGOs. They can be faith-based or non-faith-based. We work together with a variety of German NGOs and international NGOs. And of course, they are the important actors on the ground, especially if they work with local actors and also local NGOs, because they are the closest to a forced displaced population, and was always for us an important way to see how can humanitarian assistance be as local as possible. And that already brings me a little bit to the question how we work. So we have a couple of sometimes inspirational goals. Localization also comes with a lot of questions on how many people can you actually have at headquarters to work with 1,000 different NGOs. That's not really possible. So localization often has to go through an intermediary, and then maybe can argue it's not as local as it should be, but this is definitely something we're working on, to be as flexible as possible, to give our partners big flexibility to react quick in cases where circumstances and needs are changing, to be reliable as much as the budget situation allows that, not to have like one organization that gets a lot of funding one year and the next they hardly get anything, and see if we can have like multi-annual funding and multi-annual projects. That's something that also we aspire to. And a big topic in disaster-induced humanitarian assistance is, or disaster-induced situations of displacement, is anticipatory humanitarian assistance. We worked on that for a longer time and really ramped up the funding for that, to really be able for disaster-prone areas to see what are benchmarks, what are triggers that can be defined before, and to have like some objective benchmarks that automatically trigger payment of cash or specific measures. For example, area that's prone to flooding, people could get funding so they can have a possibility to bring their household goods and their livestock to safety. So maybe then reducing the number of people who are like forcibly displaced by this natural catastrophe, but are able to really return quicker and still have like their livelihoods when they return to the place. So this is something we have worked on and try to also expand on that. And then, of course, also speed is important. We're a big supporter of the Central Emergency Relief Fund of the UN, but also other pooled funding mechanisms that have the possibility to really be very fast, and then be able to reach affected populations. I think two topics I want to mention in also how we work, or what is important, so that actually what can practitioners of diplomacy do in situations of forced displacement. One is humanitarian diplomacy, really use your political power and political connections to make sure that humanitarian assistance can reach those people in need without undue barriers, and also to be able to really reach the most vulnerable population, and not the population that maybe is closest to you or is dear to the government of the affected population, but really to be able to work and deliver humanitarian assistance according to humanitarian principles. And with that, also humanitarian protection is something that also we try to really spend more money or provide more money for organizations that provide that. That is both really physical protection, but also legal protection, protection against sexual and gender-based violence, and really work on all these issues also at a higher level, at the UN level, with affected communities, but also affected governments, to be able to really make sure that people who have lost everything are also really protected, because they are the most vulnerable population after all. So it's kind of like a very fast, speedy ride through some of the, I'd say, the principles we as a donor gave ourselves and aspire to fulfill. As I mentioned, the refugee hosting part of Germany, I think the most visible example at the moment is refugees, forcibly displaced people from Ukraine. So currently there's registered 1.1 million refugees from Ukraine. Not 100% sure if when people choose to return or return on a temporary basis, they might not deregister if the number is totally current, but this is the current official number. And of those, they in Germany have the possibility, they have protective status, they have the possibility to take up employment, they receive benefits, social welfare, and health insurance, schooling. I mean, anyhow, schooling in Germany is for free. Kids from Ukraine, around 220,000 were attending school in the last academic year. They attend regular German schools free of charge, like everybody else does as well. They can go to universities. And the idea was not to have like separate classes for Ukrainians, but to integrate them into the regular curriculum and the regular teaching. And so maybe have some adults from Ukraine who have worked in the educational system to be like assistant teachers to assist, and also, of course, to have like some German language classes on the side, because of course all the teaching is taking place in German, but then also in a school age, children really pick up very fast, and it's always anecdotal evidence, but here that this has been working pretty well, and especially kids who are like in school leaving age, I believe many of them will stay to study in Germany, and hopefully have a pathway also, if they would like to have like a basically to stay in Germany for the time also after the war in Ukraine is over. But that brings us away from the forced migration topic to like questions of legal migrations, which I believe is not the topic today. And therefore, I will stop with this and hand back to Geoffrey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Very, very interesting. And I think given the importance of Germany in resolving so many forced migration problems, it is extremely important that we be having this panel today. And so I'm going to move on now to our second speaker, and this is Simon Morris Langer. Simon is leading the research and knowledge sharing portfolio at Allianz Foundation in Berlin. Before joining the foundation, Simon served as Deputy Head of Research with the Expert Council on Integration and Migration in Berlin, which is, I understand, a leading nonpartisan think tank devoted to migration and immigrant integration. Simon's research and policy work in Europe and North America focuses on social justice, education reform, and migration. He holds a PhD in comparative and international education from Humboldt University in Berlin, and he has been educated in Germany, United States, and Singapore. Simon's latest project is a comparative study on how young Europeans imagine and shape the world of tomorrow. Simon, it's very, very nice to see you and to welcome you at the conference, and we look forward to your remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this very generous introduction and for the invitation to reflect on our work through a lens of diplomacy, which was also somewhat new to me. So yeah, I prepared some slides that are sort of the results of this reflection. Let me try to display them. I hope you all are able to see this.
Yes, they look good.
Thank you. Yeah, essentially, so maybe a few words on the foundation. So Allianz Foundation has been around for only 2-3 years, and we're a operational and grant-making foundation based in Berlin, but we're truly a European foundation. So a lot of the examples, a lot of the things I talk about, they're gonna be pertain to the German situation, but also situations across Europe and also Europe writ larger, not just the European Union countries, but also the Balkans, Turkey, so like larger Europe, if you will. And yeah, I reflected on the migration-related work that people in our network. So this is a lot about our network, and only at the end about the foundation, about the NGOs, the citizens diplomat in our network do when it comes to migration, and yeah, the benefits of being a non-state actor and the productive ambiguity that they operate with, but also the risks that come with being a non-state actor and not having a protective shield, the protective shield of a state. The foundation, like I said, has been around for 3 years. We're active across Europe in 3 areas. One is empowering marginalized groups, of which refugees, former refugees, are a big group. The second would be strengthening civil society, including NGOs that seek to amplify refugee voices. And the third one would be a more socially just climate transformation, and climate migration also plays into that. So the topic of forced migration cuts through these 3 areas that we and the people in our network are working on. Put very simply, we support, we connect. I mean, foundation is, of course, also a convener. Civil society that is creative, innovative, and promotes dialogue across national borders. This sounds very lofty, almost like a sentence from ChatGPT, but there's a lot behind it. Creative means, so the foundation used to be a cultural foundation. We only relaunched 3 years ago. We have a 25-year legacy of working with politically active artists and cultural workers. So a lot of the projects, and you'll see that, still have that kind of tonality and these instruments that are being utilized for purposes of political advocacy, for example. Innovative. Our network is innovative. The majority of organizations and citizens diplomats are like active for less than 5 years, also with very fresh ideas oftentimes. And we promote dialogue across national borders. You'll see that the people we work with, they live and breathe in a transnational setting. And yeah, this is just for full disclosure, we only support people who stand up for progressive values and visions of the future. I recently ran an analysis of all our projects the last 2 years. This is really true. And yeah, given the framing that we're talking about here, I would say, yeah, we support and connect practitioners of diplomacy. We call these practitioners risk takers, you see at the bottom. So these are people, civil society leaders, politically active artists, investigative journalists that sometimes need to take risk as they stand up for artistic freedom, freedom of press, freedom of expression, and also for refugee rights in jurisdictions where this isn't always seen as desirable. Think Hungary, think Turkey, think parts of the Balkans. So yeah, we support them, and we try to, as a foundation, do our best to help them be productive in their work. To give you some examples, this is quite abstract. Here's a few examples of people and organizations we fund. One is we have a fellowship program. David Yambio is a co-founder, spokesperson of a movement, Refugees in Libya, where he's based. He's advocating along with refugees in the country, also at the EU level to help stop funding for the Libyan Coast Guard, and also ensure that these life-threatening journeys across the Mediterranean with smugglers become a thing of the past. He's one of our grantees. The second thing is it's called Refocus Media Labs. We support an organization that equips asylum seekers and recognized refugees in mostly Greece with media creation skills so they can tell their stories to a larger audience and become more skilled at storytelling. The picture you see here, this is a music video shoot of an Afghan rapper who is currently in Greece. Another thing, this is a project that is in Germany, mostly also in France and a few other countries, is the Narrative Change Academy. When we talk about refugee rights, refugee integration, we often talk about structural integration. So labor market integration, education integration into the educational system, housing, so these absolute necessities. What is less talked about is political participation. It's more seen as sort of a luxury down the road, but we as a foundation think this is really important. So we fund this academy, which equips refugees, former refugees, also second generation migrants, to tell more inclusive stories, especially when it comes to Muslim life in Germany and in other countries. And I mean, telling compelling narratives can go quite a long way. Some of you might be familiar with this project. A person in our network was the creative director of this project. It was called The Walk. They built a large puppet of an 8-year-old Syrian girl, which walked from Gaza up to Manchester across 11 countries. Yeah, and this was quite widely received project. One more I'd like to share. So we're across wider Europe, and of course from Berlin, this is quite a big task. And of course, we don't know about local context in all sorts of regions across Europe. So we have trusted partners that we don't only give project funding to or fellowships, but more long-term funding. Also the ability to re-grant, to grow a network in this case, southern Italy, in other cases in Turkey, in Kosovo, in Spain. So instead of having offices abroad, we decided to work with trusted civil society partners that carry out our mission with a lot of autonomy, also when it comes to forced migration. So that's sort of the quote-unquote migration professionals in our network. Some of the projects that explicitly deal with forced migration and the ramifications thereof, but also just and the war in Ukraine already came up as an example of how a very nimble network of citizen diplomats, of NGOs, of practitioners of diplomacy can respond very quickly and also fill gaps left by the state, inevitably sometimes in emergency situations. So when the war in Ukraine broke out, people from our network, people who don't work on migration, they work on disinformation, climate transformation, many, and we collected data on this systematically. They dropped what they were doing, sometimes rushing down to the border to help unaccompanied minors across the border, to give them shelter and food, so sort of more emergency relief work. Others were more active in the political advocacy, leverage networks across borders. For example, in situations where government fell short, in the case of, for example, refugee women that were exposed to sexual violence, human trafficking, or Kenyan students, other people of non-European origins that wanted to flee Ukraine but were stopped at the border because they didn't look Ukrainian, raising money, in one case 1 million euros in 10 days, and then just shooting it over without worrying so much about the ins and outs of taxation. So a very nimble use of these transnational networks. And don't have to go into detail here, but sometimes these networks also in a non-emergency situation help civil society, especially in a country where civil society is under pressure, to even maintain basic functioning. And we try to support that. I mentioned, yeah, this is sort of productive. They're nimble. They can react quickly. They can leverage these transnational connections. That's great, but it also comes with quite some risk. I mean, first of all, like going into a war zone in this case, but also in general, working on an issue such as forced migration, refugee rights. This is an issue that in Germany, increasingly in other countries, you don't only have friends. So you're being attacked, be it on social media with smear campaigns. There's physical attacks, lawsuits, and this can take a toll on mental health of and just also the physical health, sometimes the financial well-being of these citizen diplomats. So if we sort of celebrate these individuals, we also need to acknowledge that, yeah, there's a lot of work to do when it comes to mitigating these risks. I would like to close with what our role, how we see our role as a funder. First and foremost, but to listen closely. And if you know foundations, philanthropy, it's not so trite. To be honest, sometimes foundation also operate in the context, oh, this is what the funder, who sometimes has passed long ago, wanted, and that's what we got to do, and we can't deviate from that. That's also enshrined in the law in Germany to some degree. So we deliberately gave ourselves a very broad mission, and we filled that with insights. So when the foundation relaunched 3 years ago, we said we want to be a foundation that listens and puts the needs of our target groups that work with refugees and other marginalized groups at the core of our mission. So we conducted 10 different future labs in 7 cities, 3 online labs, and we had 60 individual interviews, in total 166 civil society leaders, investigative journalists, politically active artists, and cultural workers. We took their feedback, 105 hours of conversation, transcribed it, analyzed it, and distilled 5 outcome goals for the foundation. I'm going to close with this. So for the foundation, this is actually, this is not even on our website, so this is more inside information. So the mission, as I said, is pretty broad, intentionally broad. Better living conditions for next generation. And the theory of change I mentioned, we support and connect risk takers, read practitioners of diplomacy for the purpose of this presentation. And these 5 outcome goals, they were derived from these 105-hour systematic conversation. A big thing was we lack safe spaces in which to vent, plan, network, build these networks of these transnational networks of trust. So we seek to not see networking as, oh, that's nice, you can do that, but that's an integral part of the funding. And this takes resources. So we really put resources behind networking. Same with dialogue with decision makers. Some people are killing it on social media, and you would think, oh, they have so much influence, but they have almost zero connections into ministries, into elected officials. So we create convenings where we bring these different stakeholders together to so that they can make their point, they can amplify what they're already doing. And then also we try to kind of put our firepower behind making society at large understand that this work of these practitioners of diplomacy is not just like this is nice to have, it's an important aspect of a living democracy, along with that's what the foundation here in the middle normally does, improving organizational capacities through funding. But then also, and that's a tough one, I would like to close with that one, the one in the middle, having that our grantees have reduced risk of civic engagement. I mean, that's a tough one. Things we've come up with is sort of ad hoc legal advice, mental health resources. But yeah, that's also something that we're really grappling with, because it is a hot issue. It's getting increasingly hot, and our grantees are at the center of it. And yeah, thank you so much. Excited for the questions.
Thank you so much, Simon. That really is quite fascinating. I mean, I'm struck by the fact that a lot of attention in the philanthropy sort of world looks at the United States And I think that there is a lot that we can learn from what's happening in Europe and what's happening in Germany in particular. So I hope there are some questions on that when we get to the Q&A. But thanks so much. That really was a wonderful talk. I now want to talk or introduce our next speaker, our third and final speaker for this panel, and that is Imad Al-Sulaiman. Imad is a refugee author. He's a human rights advocate and a voice for refugees and migrants. He's born in Syria and he sought asylum in Germany in 2015. And an experience that he describes as having profoundly shaped his writing and his activism. His first book was called Jasmine, The Jasmine Inferno, an escape story, and it vividly captures the harrowing journey of Syrian refugees, deeply drawing, of course, from his own experiences. Now, in addition to his literary work, Imad engages in raising awareness about the challenges faced by refugees and migrants throughout his reading tours, his participation in panel discussions such as today, and overtly political events. Imad's first-hand accounts and insights provide a really critical perspective on European migration policy and on human rights issues. Imad is currently pursuing, I believe, a master's degree in socio-political science at Humboldt University in Berlin, where he continues to deepen his understanding of the complexity surrounding migration and social justice. He lives in Germany and remains dedicated to writing and advocating for the rights of refugees and migrants, striving for a more compassionate and just world. Imad, we give you a very warm welcome to the Grace School Conference and very much look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you, Imad, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. I hope everyone hears me well. Okay, yes. Great. I will share also PowerPoint slides also with I hope you see it.
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's truly an honor to speak before you today, not only as a refugee, but as also someone whose journey reflects the harsh realities of forced migration. I mean, this conference, which has been happening since 5 years so far, is an action to be creative in a life or in the nowadays life in which we are not only affected by wars and climate change, but also by many other crises in this world. And we are actually, I'm happy that I am part of this panel, and I just wanted to explain a little bit about my experience also. I mean, what Michael started and then Simon continued, I will narrow down now to my experience as maybe like a citizen diplomat. Yeah, my name is Imad Al-Sulaiman. I'm a writer and a human rights activist who fled Syria in 2015 because of the war. I believe everyone knows about it very well. And after 7 years of exile in Germany, I published my first novel, my first non-fictional novel. The name of it in German, Das Jasmin Inferno, and the English translation is The Jasmine Inferno. It tells the story of the harsh escape from Syria across the Mediterranean Sea and through Europe, a journey that millions like me have undertaken, with countless lives tragically lost along the way, specifically in the Mediterranean, which is still happening, unfortunately. I am thrilled to share that also, that in cooperation with DePaul University Department of Modern Languages, we are working on the English translation of the book. And hopefully it's gonna be done next year. I will keep you posted on that anyway. I had hoped to be with you in person today in Chicago, but unfortunately, I applied for the visa, for the US American visa, but in Berlin. But since January this year, I couldn't be granted the visa despite my German citizenship so far. And this personal experience highlights also the border, political and bureaucratic hurdles that refugees often face. As it is a topic and I will address later in my talk anyway, but I wanted just also to mention it. We are here to discuss today the transitional realities and transprofessional response to phased migration. We will explore the questions Jeffrey for sure mentioned before, and yes, as we talked about NGOs and about foundations and about state actors, I would narrow it down more and more to continue talking about NGOs and about actually like individuals. In my situation, I will take myself as an example. So I will draw not only from my personal experience, but also to two examples of NGOs which are actually which we are in cooperation together. The first one is Seebrücke, which is advocating human rights, specifically refugees' rights in Germany and in in Europe in general and worldwide as far as possible. And the other NGO is Sea-Watch, which actually conducts research and rescue missions in the Mediterranean, in which the European Union decided to withdraw the mission of rescuing people who are on the move and who are fleeing wars and torture. And yes, I would like to narrow down to exactly here and yes, citizen diplomacy and traditional diplomacy has been seen as a domain of state officials, but in today's world, diplomacy goes far beyond state actors. Forced migration is not just a political issue, it is a deeply human one. So I would say also it is like not only, I would like to address it not only as diplomacy of non-state actors, but it would be also human diplomacy in this case, where individuals and non-state actors become also more or less the voice of marginalized groups. And this is critical in our today's world. For me, this rule truly came to life when I began sharing my story through literature. When I was writing the Jasmine Inferno was not only an act of personal reflection, but a bridge to connect with countless other people or others whose lives have been touched by the tragedy of forced migration. Since it's published, I had the privilege of being invited to numerous readings, like over 30 readings so far, panel discussions and community gatherings where we can actually have more emotional exchange. We can go deeply in talks and in discussions and get rid of the maybe barriers between the communities and between the mentalities to a certain extent. These events have become much more than literary presentations for me, actually. They are space where the realities of migration are humanized and normalized to certain extent, where stories are shared and where local communities and also political groups and politicians could be also in the audience and just have their maybe role as humans to feel the tragedy of being forcibly displaced. And every event has been an opportunity to break down also walls, to build understanding and to challenge the stereotypes and to challenge the prejudice about refugees. It's humbling to witness how a story could be also actually an instrument and to be a bridge and to open doors for people to get closer and closer to each other. And in my opinion, it is also one of the main factors which we need now more and more, because I have the feeling that specifically in Germany, but we can just say maybe in the whole world and specifically in the Western world, the people are getting more isolated and getting more separated. And in this case, I wanted to mention also to what Simon actually said in his brilliant presentation also. These kind of the people who come to country and they seek refuge and they seek asylum, they are mostly isolated, excluded, and they have in addition to their experience on the move and in the war or in the torture or because of the reason they fled, they have also another type of challenges. They are challenging their maybe daily life in Germany or in other countries. And now I'm excited to take this work even further, actually, starting next week in cooperation with Seebrücke. I will be holding readings also, and I will be on reading tour across more than 12 German cities. This tour is not just about sharing the book, it's about creating a platform for voices that often go unheard, about mobilizing communities and about bringing more emotions in the daily life of the people who are actually more or less shaped by the news of one person who has done something wrong, and then the whole people of the country from which this person comes, which who could be actually over the million, who are doctors, who are teachers, who are workers, who are every single type of the people, then they will be stereotyped through these kind of shaping media and shaping news. And yes, this journey is deeply personal, but it is also it is part of a larger movement, a movement that insists on the dignity and rights of displaced people, a movement that refuses to turn a blind eye to the ongoing humanitarian crisis at European borders also. Together with Seebrücke, we are actually trying also to let our voice as refugees heard and to be part of the discussion and to talk to the people directly in these situations, in these challenging times. And yes, actually, I will try now to go to the institutional, yes, the institutions and the NGOs are partnering for humanitarian protection. But in this case, as we know, as we heard about from also Michael about the UNHCR, also IMO and other institutes, international institutes. But at the same time, the local diplomacy driven by citizen activists and NGOs is actually very critical in our life and in our world of today. And in this case, I also want to mention the Sea-Watch, who are actually conducting and saving lives of refugees in the Mediterranean, who are more or less, and unfortunately we should see it also the way the European maybe policies are trying to deliver to us. They are just left to their fatal, to their destiny. And in this case, Sea-Watch is one of the other NGOs doing great job in the Mediterranean, and we need also to bring this kind of NGOs also to the center of our discussions. And yes, rethinking mobility and migration beyond borders. Migration is often seen as a crisis. It is not. It is a challenge to national sovereignty. It is also not. But in reality, migration is part of the human experience, and it offers opportunities for growth, resilience, and shared prosperity. Diplomacy, particularly when shaped by citizen activists, has the power to reframe migration as a resource, not as a burden. And at that point, I wanted to get back to Jeffrey and thank you everyone for listening. And I hope you had the time also.
Yes, no, Imad, you've timed things perfectly, beautifully, and what I must say is that you've done what is always difficult in speaking, to combine, let's say, conceptual and policy clarity with great compassion. And thank you very much for bringing that to our panel. Greatly appreciated.